First at 9 this Friday, the 16th of January 2026. IMF scrutiny. IMF fact-finding mission to visit Sri Lanka next week. Cyclone Ditwa's impact on the IMF program to be assessed. Adios. US Ambassador Julie Chang concludes tenure. Sri Lanka's resilience during a turbulent time praised by the outgoing envoy. A House united. President Dissanayake vows to ensure national unity. Pledges unwavering action to eliminate narcotics from Sri Lanka. Reform now. Parents of grade 6 students stage protest. Immediate implementation of the postponed curriculum revision demanded. Prime Minister vows justice to grade 6 students caught in the crossfire of the education reform controversy.
Kalin baby so rupial anuwakata. Kalin baby podi hamotamai.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9 on the Derana News channel. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Brought to you by the only Sri Lankan media network to rise to the pinnacle across all media platforms. Recognized as the best by every survey and beloved by the people. Now in your top story tonight, President Kumara Dissanayake assures that this government will never provide political refuge to the narcotics trade ever. Speaking at the Northern Provinces edition of A Nation United National Mission in Jaffna today, President Dissanayake also vowed to never let racial or religious tensions reach a tipping point ever again.
The Northern Provinces edition of the A Nation United National Mission was held this afternoon at the Jaffna Technical College in Kokuville. These national missions have been organized across the island to curb the proliferation of narcotics island-wide. Government ministers, members of the security forces, police officers, government officials and a large number of local residents participated in the program. President Kumara Dissanayake, who attended the event, received a warm welcome from those present. The President also presided over the presentation of cash rewards from the Police Reward Fund to police officers who carried out successful raids against narco-trafficking.
As a country, we have many hopes and dreams. However, an overwhelming challenge looms over our hopes and dreams, threatening its realization. That challenge is the proliferation of narcotics. The wealth and power generated by the trade of narcotics have infiltrated state infrastructure. We know this because some convicts engage in the distribution of narcotics behind bars. We acknowledge that the police force is doing an outstanding job. However, a few bad apples in the police force are entangled in these nefarious networks. Moreover, we have identified certain key government employees who have fallen prey to these networks of organized crime. Some of those state workers have been arrested. This industry prospered primarily due to political refuge. In some electorates, the personal branding of some politicians was closely linked to the narcotics they peddled. The people of this country have now formed a government that will never provide political refuge to the distribution of narcotics. We have also uncovered that certain heads of institutions tasked with curbing the proliferation of narcotics have unfortunately engaged themselves in criminal activity. On certain occasions, evidence filed in court has been manipulated to let suspects go free. Certain officers at the top of law enforcement have been subdued by the power of the narco trade. Therefore, the government must defeat this crisis. I guarantee that these efforts will never be reversed. Is this challenge one that must be overcome? Yes, we must overcome it. We will never allow racial conflicts to take root ever again. We are aware that minor incidents of racism pop up here and there. Certain conflicts have arisen over religious sites. We will never allow racism to raise its head ever again. I understand that many Northerners must be seeing me for the first time. Please know that we have embraced you with love and respect. We have committed ourselves to maintaining the trust you have placed in us. The Northern sentiment in the past was one that demanded a separate state. This is because the North thought that the South had its own government. The North never felt that the government in the South was also theirs. However, we must also be aware that even Southern citizens were marginalized by previous regimes. Previous governments were formed in the interest of a few families. For the very first time, a people's government has been formed. People in the North and the South have faith in the same government today.
Meanwhile, the inauguration ceremony ceremony of the 2026 National Housing Programme was held this morning at the Veerasingham Primary School grounds in Meesale, Chavakacheri under the patronage of President Anurukumara Dissanayake. At the ceremony, construction of 2,500 houses were initiated, while housing assistance too was provided for the resettlement of families displaced by the war in the northern and eastern provinces. The President later attended a groundbreaking ceremony of a house funded under this initiative. Meanwhile, President Anurukumara Dissanayake visited the ancient Nagadeepa Rajamahaviharaya this afternoon. The President subsequently met with the chief incumbent of the temple, Venerable Navadagala Padmakirti Tissatero.
Now, outgoing US Ambassador Julie Chung says Sri Lanka continued to make progress despite the political and economic crises she witnessed upon her arrival. Chung, who concluded her 4-year term today, expressed gratitude to the people of Sri Lanka, praising their resilience and determination in moving the nation forward during a challenging period.
Julie Chung, who served as the United States Ambassador to Sri Lanka since 2022, stepped down from her post today after nearly 4 years in office. In a farewell message, she expressed gratitude to the people of Sri Lanka, thanking them for their warmth, cooperation and support throughout her tenure.
Aibawan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum. Hello, my dear Sri Lankan friends and colleagues. As I prepare to leave Sri Lanka after nearly 4 years, I'm proud of the results we delivered. Together with Sri Lankans across the country, we strengthened security cooperation, expanded economic ties, and reinforced a partnership that makes both the United States and Sri Lanka safer and stronger. I depart knowing the U.S.-Sri Lanka relationship, rooted in our shared history and democratic principles, will remain vital in the Indo-Pacific. When I arrived in 2022, Sri Lanka was navigating a significant economic and political crisis. What I found, however, was a nation determined to move forward. In this crucial moment, the United States stood firmly alongside the Sri Lankan people, supporting stability, recovery, and a stronger partnership for the future. Together, we mark the 75th anniversary of U.S.-Sri Lankan relations. And today, after 77 years of progress and shared challenges, our relationship continues to grow. Serving here as ambassador has been one of the great honors and blessings of my life. Everything we've done together, from strengthening security and port infrastructure to supporting key programs, has helped protect American interests while building a strong partnership with Sri Lanka. So to the people of this beautiful island, thank you. Your art, stories, resilience, and spirit will always stay with me. As I say farewell, I leave proud of what we accomplished and confident of what comes next. There's something truly magical about Sri Lanka. Stuti, Nandri, and thank you, Sri Lanka.
US President Donald Trump has proposed Eric Mayer as the next United States Ambassador to Sri Lanka. Deputy Chief of Mission Jane Howell will serve as charge d'affaires until a new ambassador is appointed. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa met outgoing Ambassador Chung this morning at his office. Premadasa expressed his appreciation for the ambassador's support and cooperation to Sri Lanka during her time in office. Meanwhile, the Pivithiruhela Urumaya also commented on conclusion of the US ambassador's tenure.
The US ambassador to Sri Lanka is ending her tenure today. We should celebrate her departure with much pomp and circumstance, since she was a curse for Sri Lanka for 4 long years. Whenever I attend ceremonies hosted by embassies, outgoing US Ambassador Chung took great pains to avoid me. She is aware that I know all about her conspiracies. I am happy that she feared my presence. I urge the incoming ambassador to also fear us the same way Chung did.
අනාගතේන තානාපතිලට කියන්නේ ජුලී චන්ට් අපිට තිබ්බ බය ඔයගොල්ලෝ තියාගන්න කියලා.
ඔබේ සම හඳුනාගෙන ඖෂධීය ශාකසාරමය forever face wash එකක් භාවිතා කරන්න.
Now, on the education reform front, a group of parents of 6th grade students staged a protest in front of the Ministry of Education today, demanding the immediate implementation of the revised curriculum for grade 6. Meanwhile, the newly formed National Movement for Education Reforms emphasizes that postponing the education reforms due to what it called minor issues would be a significant setback for the advancement of Sri Lanka's education sector.
On January 13th, the Cabinet announced a decision to postpone the implementation of the Grade 6 curriculum revision until next year, while the revised Grade 1 curriculum would be implemented this year as scheduled. Against this backdrop, a group of parents of Grade 6 students staged a protest in front of the Ministry of Education today, calling for the immediate implementation of the revised curriculum for Grade 6. Protesters called on authorities to implement the new modules for all subjects except the controversial English language module. Subsequently, 5 representatives were granted a meeting with ministry officials, including the Education Secretary. Following a 2-hour discussion, the representative stated that the Education Secretary had confirmed that errors in Grade 6 modules had been corrected. However, the demonstrators said their children will not attend school if the previous curriculum continues to be taught. Meanwhile, 2 other protests were staged in Madirigiriya and Mathura today in support of the demonstration in front of the Ministry of Education. In the meantime, the Samagi Janabalawega staged a protest in Anuradhapura opposing the education reforms. Meanwhile, diverging opinions were expressed regarding the current situation surrounding the education reforms.
More than 300,000 children are losing an opportunity due to a minor issue. This is an unfortunate situation for the nation. Mistakes can happen.
The criticism against the education reforms did not originate from the appropriate forum. Politicians fading into irrelevance protested in front of the Ministry of Education, and religious figures raised alarm as they are involved in spreading delusion. This is not the first time in history where errors were present in textbooks. We are prepared to take this conversation to every region, starting from Kandy tomorrow. A national movement for education reforms has now been established. But why announce it to the public only now? It should have been done last year before the reform process began. The National Institute of Education did not draft a roadmap for the reforms until September. From 2020 to 2024, funds totaling 48,033,000 rupees were allocated to the NIE for this program. Where is that money now? Reforms are essential for the development of education in our country. However, they cannot be implemented haphazardly. It is unclear who drafted these reforms or whether a committee was responsible for them. The government knew that proceeding in this manner would not be successful. An expert committee on education must be established immediately. Fulfill your promises instead of remaining inactive.
Now, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya vows to deliver justice to the children caught in the midst of the controversy over the government's education reforms. The Premier went on to highlight that both school children and their parents are disappointed with the postponement of the Grade 6 curriculum revision. The Prime Minister also condemns attempts to distort facts pertaining to the education reforms, while reiterating the importance of social discourse on the matter.
An informatory session on the new education reforms for education officials and school principals of Chilau was held today in Madampe under the patronage of Minister of Education, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya.
When listening to televised debates these days, the need for education reforms becomes even more apparent. When considering the discourse of those opposing the reforms, what becomes apparent is that they would never make such statements had they received a proper education themselves. I recently saw someone criticizing the fact that the cover of one module was printed in the colors of the rainbow. Is it forbidden to teach children about rainbows? Has the discourse on education reforms fallen so low? Dialogue is important. However, we condemn the distortion of facts. The current dialogue is extremely positive. Whenever a systemic transformation is attempted, there will always be those who oppose it. We have understood that and must proceed while making corrections wherever necessary. We have felt the disappointment of students awaiting entry into the 6th grade and their parents. We do not want to let any injustice befall them. Therefore, we will definitely formulate a program to address the situation.
Now, leader of the opposition Sajid Premadasa says the government that once opposed education reforms when in the opposition now attempts to implement education reforms despite a severe lack of resources for its facilitation. Issuing a special statement, the leader of the opposition also requested the Prime Minister to refrain from shining the spotlight away from the controversial education reforms.
I heard that the Prime Minister had requested the opposition not to oppose the education reforms. I would like to ask her not to divert attention away from the controversial education reforms by manipulating information, data and statistics. Consult your conscience and ask yourself if you are truly attempting to implement education reforms of good quality. Aren't these reforms being implemented at a time where the education sector is marred by a severe shortage of necessary equipment and resources? We are not against reforms. The Prime Minister herself had previously opposed the distribution of smart boards, computers and printers. She used to oppose discussions on improving English language fluency. The Prime Minister ridiculed Japanese being taught as a subject. Should I remind you of those who ridiculed the importance of teaching Hindi and Chinese? We did not betray the 4.1 million strong student populace. You did. At least now, set your arrogance aside and choose the correct course of action.
With that, here's a look at some thoughts shared in the political arena over the latest developments concerning the controversial education reforms. If expired food is sold at a retail store, the Consumer Affairs Authority finds the management, not the sales executive. The company's management is entrusted the responsibility of making sure expired food is not sold. Similarly, if a blunder was made with regard to the education reforms, Dr. Harni Amarasuriya must assume responsibility since she heads the Ministry of Education. She cannot absolve herself from responsibility and pin the blame on other executives. Internal investigations can shed light on the conduct of executives and officials involved, but accountability must be borne by the minister before the country. This is not how a ministry is run. We are ordinary people shouldering extraordinary responsibilities. We fearlessly attempted to execute the overwhelming task of transforming the country's education system. Despite being an ordinary bunch, we will never falter in the face of extraordinary feats. The government has failed to engage in meaningful discourse over the education reforms they proposed themselves. It is apparent that no government MP can speak on the education reforms they proposed themselves. That is because they neither drafted the reforms nor did they involve their intellectuals in the process. These reforms were hastily put together after extracting bits and pieces from Western modules. What we need is not a government that implements its decisions with an iron fist. Governments may intend to take various decisions. Those decisions, however, have to be subject to public discourse. Some may interpret that to be the government reversing its policy decisions. However, a government cannot progress on the contrary. For the government's stability and perpetuity, adapting to change is imperative. This entire process we follow is an art. A government must first have discipline. Public representatives are tasked with maintaining that discipline. When public representatives break this discipline, the government's image erodes gradually. If the government is unaware of this, divine intervention will be its only saving grace. Now, meanwhile, Sarva Jana Balaya leader parliamentarian Dilith Jayavira says that his party has successfully transformed Sri Lanka's political culture, moving away from a system where politicians only engage with the public during election periods. Jayavira made these remarks during an event in Matale.
The Sarvajana Sabha of the Salagama Matale was officially established yesterday evening under the patronage of Sarvajana Balaya leader parliamentarian Dilith Jayavira.
We have not come here to meet you in the way traditional politicians do because we are not traditional politicians. We have not come to make promises or seek your votes as there is no election in the foreseeable future. You may have attended political meetings before and listened to countless speeches. I can see by looking at you that you received nothing in return. We are exerting effort day and night to bring about a genuine political transformation, one that will change your lives. We entered politics after achieving success in our own lives, which is why we speak about building an entrepreneurial state. True happiness cannot be achieved by offering people small, temporary subsidies. That is why we introduced the Sarvajana Sabha concept. This is not a politicized divisional committee, nor is it a system to gather attendees for political rallies. Sarvajana Sabha will guide you and your children toward a brighter future future, empower women, equip young people with knowledge and explain how we can rise together as a nation. We have already proven through our actions, whenever you were in need, we have always been the first to come forward and help, and we will continue to do so.
Welcome back. Now, a delegation from the International Monetary Fund is scheduled to arrive in Sri Lanka next week to assess the economic impact of Cyclone Detwa and its impact on Sri Lanka's IMF-supported program. The IMF's communication director, Julie Kozak, said the fact-finding mission will visit Sri Lanka from the 22nd to the 28th of January.
A fact-finding mission will visit Sri Lanka January 22nd to 28th. The goal of the mission is to firm up our understanding of the size and the scope of the damage caused by the cyclone. The team will discuss with the authorities their policy intentions and implications of the impact of the cyclone for the EFF program.
Kozak also commented on electricity tariff revisions in Sri Lanka.
On electricity tariffs, there is a commitment under the program to maintain cost recovery in the utility sector, and that's really important to help ensure fiscal sustainability, because that would help the utility company to not run financial losses. What exactly may be needed to support Sri Lanka going forward is something that our fact-finding team will certainly be discussing with the authorities.
Ahead of IMF mission's visit next week, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, joining Derana's 360 program last Monday, said Sri Lanka would have to renegotiate certain key benchmarks of the IMF program.
Public Fund Management Act
The Public Fund Management Act stipulates that this year's government expenditure should not exceed 13% of GDP. That benchmark will have to be revised. There is a provision in the Act itself stating that the target can be revised under special circumstances such as these. The target for the primary account surplus is 2.3% of GDP. That too will have to be revised, as it will be impossible to maintain the primary surplus at 2.3% of GDP next year. Furthermore, the foreign reserve target will be difficult to achieve in the face of increased import demand. Therefore, negotiations will have to be held on revising the target.
Now, in an exciting new development, Derana yesterday launched its latest digital platform, Derana Plus, offering viewers free access to a wide range of streaming content as the latest experience offered by the Derana Media Network. The platform features original web series, original movies, blockbuster singular movies and international original content. Derana Plus also provides expanded opportunities for local directors and artists to showcase and popularize their creative work. The Derana Plus app is now available for download on Google Play and the App Store. Welcome back. Now, in your business news, the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority launched a special initiative aimed at meeting the national tourism target set for this year. The chairman of the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, Buddhika Hevawasam, says promotional campaigns will be rolled out across several European countries to attract visitors during periods traditionally considered off-peak seasons. He notes that tourists from Spain and neighboring regions tend to travel during the summer months, and promotional efforts will therefore be focused on those key markets. As part of the wider strategy, a tourism promotion campaign has already been conducted in India, covering major cities including Delhi, Mumbai and Chennai. According to Hevawasam, the primary objective of the Indian campaign is to diversify the tourist base and attract high-value visitors to Sri Lanka. The chairman also points to a strong start to the year, stating that more than 94,000 tourists arrived in Sri Lanka within the first week of January 2026. Now, the Colombo Stock Exchange maintained positive momentum today as a result of price gains in counters such as the Colombo Dockyard, Lanka IOC and John Keel's Holdings. The benchmark ASPI gained 0.10% to close at 23,731.60, while the more liquid S&P Sri Lanka 20 increased by 0.28% to end the day at 6,560.08. Market turnover was 4.72 billion rupees. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net buyers purchasing shares worth 65 million rupees. And now here's a look at today's exchange rates. Now, in your international business news, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Canadian PM Mark Carney have announced lower tariffs, signaling a reset in their countries' relationship after a key meeting in Beijing. China is expected to lower levies on Canadian canola oil from 85% to 15% by 1st March, while Ottawa has agreed to tax Chinese electric vehicles at the most favored nation rate of 6.1%. The deal is a breakthrough after years of strained ties and tit-for-tat levies. Xi hailed the turnaround in their relationship as Carney became the first Canadian leader to visit China in nearly a decade. Earlier in his 3-day visit, he had said that the Canada-China partnership sets the two countries up for a new world order. In the deal struck today, Canada will allow only 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market at the 6.1% tariff rate. That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.